Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, DMs Guild, huge design space, and that is essentially games and stuff. And this week I am joined by I guess former rival. if we have that sort of torrid history, Grady Wang. Hello.
Hello, yeah, former rival, and now we've teamed up, right? Like we're on an Avengers team now.
It's well, I suppose it is a case of like we were rivals at Design Dash, ultimately bested by Cat Evans.
Yes,
they demolished us, but I think we all came closer as a result of it.
Okay, good. As long as it's like real like friendship and not one of those like your enemies closer sort of deals.
Oh, well, okay. Ask me again at the end of the podcast, and then it's nice to keep those options open. But no, I think what is it? The Design Dash is always a case of like enter as enemies, and it's a case of where Godzilla, King Kong, they fight, they come out of it, holding hands. It's very sort of beautiful.
I still need to see that movie.
I still haven't seen it. I assume that they hug or they get together at the end. Otherwise,
course,
why? Yeah. So I guess for the people listening, then Grady, what are some of the things they may know you for?
Okay, so my name is Grady Wang. I'm one half of. We started as a YouTube review channel with my partner Theo Thorson. It's called the Gallant Goblin, and so kind of not as writing or creative oriented, but our review channel kind of started as about minis, and so we were trying to buy the official repainted minis for our home games, and we were like, there's like nowhere to actually get a good look at these. Mm-hmm. There's a site called Minis Gallery that has like pictures, but that was like about it. And so we're like, well, like, why don't we buy some and put them on a turntable and show them up and kind of talk about how you can use them and see where it goes from there. And it's been 3 years now. It's three very roller coaster exciting years. We do a lot of other reviews now and partner with a lot of companies and things like that. So that's kind of where we got our start. But in terms of writing, I've had a few publications on DMsGuild, and my first one was called The Grey Merchant of Asphodel.
We have it on hand? Oh, the cover art for that is stunning.
Yeah, it's by Victor Tan. He's one of the artists that we almost always work with on every project, based in Singapore. And so I've done that, and Kill Ball, I guess, is kind of what got me onto Design Dash. Anyway, that's the one that Lisa really liked the cover for. So, I've published a few kind of supplements and adventures on DMs.
So I guess like one of my kind of first questions then is what was kind of the first drive? So like why did you want, like when it came to designing the Grey Merchant, which I believe is like a collection of items and all that sort of good stuff? Was it just like I've kind of had these ideas kicking about, I should get something like formal out there, or?
Kind of like, well, so I've always aspired to be a writer, like original, like a novel writer, or fiction and things like that. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason we did the YouTube channel was I also liked making movies, and so it's always that kind of storytelling aspect of it. And one of the things was always just like, okay, well let's start here and maybe build an audience, and then kind of grow creatively alongside anyone who wants to join the ride, sort of thing. And so we actually went to D&D Live in 2019 and met Ashley Warren and TK Johnson and that whole crew. Like they were there at the DMsGuild booth, and that was when we learned about the RPG Writer Workshop. And we're like, oh, that seems like a great opportunity to kind of start learning how to do this and mixing. So I joined the summer 2019 workshop, did not finish it, but that's kind of what got it started in terms of like, okay, well, let's write something.
I was gonna say, it's fascinating. The RPG Writer Workshop, I think at this point it's like 50% of the people that I've kind of spoken to have like almost come up from like either attempted it, or that was kind of how they kind of got their foot in the door. At least in on the writing side, it sounds like coming from like a reviewing standpoint, I imagine you've kind of been interacting or seeing the DMs Guild content for a bit of a while, or was it still mostly kind of the miniature side?
We always want to like have a certain like in-depth like kind of standard for our reviews, and always had trouble doing a lot of written DMsGuild reviews because it's so time consuming that we're just like we want to do it right, but we don't have time to do it right. And so we haven't done a lot of that yet, but we're trying to. But certainly we use DMsGuild content a ton. Like our first home game that we started running when we played D&D was the Theo DM Storm King's Thunder. And like I think half of that campaign was actually DMsGuild content. And I had no idea until he told me, because I'm not supposed to spoil myself.
Yeah.
Because we've had to do so much for the videos. But yeah, and so like, you know, especially like a lot of the content around like, well, I shouldn't say too much for spoilers, but like and kind of building out Fandolin, even using the essential with a starter kit and things like that. And so it was just like, oh yeah, like there's so many talented folks on here, and it's stuff that, you know, can go from an entire your own campaign to like, you know, I have a need here for a side quest or a creature or something that isn't in the main books. And so we can go use that. And so, yeah, there's a ton of great stuff. And I think one of our goals is to start highlighting that at some point. We're just trying to figure out where it fits in our content.
Yeah, I must admit, the kind of my mind when I think of like I suppose reviewers, I always think of what's Sabrina, so Curse of Sebs, because the amount of effort that you know they put into it's I get it, it's an ordeal, and yeah, how with certain things it's like looking at like adventures, I guess it's like you do have to kind of play through them to be able to kind of like have that ability for things like, I don't know, like a bundle of magical items. You can't play test them all. You can't, or like a book of encounters. It's I guess a good chunk of the reviewing kind of has to be based on like gut feeling or just what you think.
One thing we were thinking of doing, and I kind of tested this with the Adventures of the Potbellied Kobold Kickstarter from Jeff Stevens games, and so like was kind of like we were gonna. Because we do so much with miniatures and terrain, right? We have far too much of them. And yet still not complete, apparently. Like I couldn't, but like what we were going to do was one of the thoughts was to grab like one encounter or one interesting scene from the content and like do a video about building it up as seen on the game, on the game table. And like kind of, you know, what pieces we did, right? How it took to do that, and then how then that plays into the narrative and how you can use that to tell the story, and kind of just focus in from that aspect of it. And we thought maybe that would be something a little different that hasn't been done before. But again, that took so long to do.
Well, I was also going to say, so like coming from like a mini standpoint as well, because you've also, is it Fight Your Minis?
Yeah.
You've also, so that's like a line of products that is literally like, oh, well, we have these minis lying about. Let's kind of think about what kind of encounters we can.
And so yeah, that's something that unfortunately we haven't been able to put out at the pace that we were wanting. It was partly derailed by us moving cross country during a pandemic and a few other factors. But yeah, I had we were just like, yeah, like we get all of these minis, like a lot of times we open them and we have no idea what they are, like, and a lot of times they'll put in minis that have nothing to do with the set. Like they're a lot better about that now. But like back in the day, like you would open like a Storm King's Thunder set and get like a bunch of Yuan-Ti and be like, what? I guess if you knew about Tomb of Annihilation, but like things that don't even have stat blocks, like they're trying to release all of the hags, which Theo loves, and like not all the hags show up in any published adventures.
Yeah, I suppose it's that hard one of like, I suppose they can't necessarily, like, well, they could do like a hag bundle, but then it's a case of like, I guess that they've tried to like sneak them in with some of the other boxes.
Yeah, because they're trying to do what like sells, right? Because like their adventure sets sell so much better than even their like other sets, and so it's just kind of, it's always that market thing, right? That it's always hard to make money in the TTRPG industry. I think we all feel that. And so I was like, I didn't know if I could handle all of that with everything else we were doing, so I kind of pitched it to Stephen Pankatai, and he also brought in Sadie Lowry to edit it, and so they've been fantastic collaborators. We actually have. So we've released one for the Snowy Owlbear because we thought it was too cute not to be our first one. And then our next one is for the Tomb Tapper, actually.
Ooh.
So we're hoping to get that out this month. Like we're just getting like a couple last pieces of art for it.
Tomb Tapper, that's the one with the giant mouth, isn't it?
In its stomach, yeah.
Yeah, like the
yeah. Yeah, there's fun.
So I'm just over here going, I don't like that.
Yeah, there's one encounter that Steven wrote that was is one that's been, I guess, like casket of Amontillado into a stone wall, and all that it has is it's all that people can see is there's like a mouth in the wall, and like someone's gonna stick their hand in it.
I've always said that, you know, architecture doesn't have enough mouths in it, and I'm glad.
Exactly.
I'm glad Steve is covering that niche. So then, I guess to kind of bring it across everything that you've kind of done, then, again, having done like some kind of encounter stuff, items, you know, kill bar adventure, you've kind of dabbled around in everything. But I guess kind of where do your ideas come from? Like, how do your ideas start? What's step number one on?
The honest answer is a disturbing number of them come from puns.
Yeah, that's fair.
And like sometimes like we're doing reviews and like the YouTube auto caption comes in and it like titles things just weirdly enough that you're like, wait, that's actually a really good idea. Like I want to do an adventure about that instead. And so, you know, things like that. But like a kind of from a more like, you know, less silly side of things, like you know, a lot of the ideas kind of come from like specific characters or story moments kind of interest me. And so a lot of times like I'll have kind of a big story idea or like climax or something that I was like, oh, this would be really cool. And then like, how do we build something to get to that point? Which is not the most organic storytelling sometimes, but like it's kind of a different kind of way to motivate yourself to get.
No, I kind of make sense. It's kind of nice to kind of have those kind of like core set pieces and stuff like that, because those are the ones that the players kind of, you know, think about, and how you get there. I mean, it isn't the most important thing as long as you have this kind of like, we're fighting in a hurricane sort of thing. Or, I do have a slight question. So about Kill Bill, I'm curious. Did the idea start with trying to do like a Kill Bill parody, or was it did you kind of have like a story arc involving Bill in your mind that you're just like, oh yeah, this is about killing him, so like, killing them, so
you're going to the pun thing. It started as a Kill Bill parody. It was always like so I'm relatively new to D&D, and so I kind of, when I first joined D&D, I kind of came in it with a very video gamer perspective of things. And that caused some problems because a lot of the best parts of D&D are not like in the combat or the graphics or the things that video games are good at, right? Yeah. Like the storytelling and the role playing and so like I had a hard time breaking out of that mold. But like I also thought that there were a lot of interesting things that you could pull in from kind of video games, right? Because they've had like so many people testing them and kind of evolution in that industry, going from kind of a very mechanical perspective to a cinematic story, more storytelling oriented direction, more artistic, right? And I kind of feel like the TTRPG industry maybe kind of is following a similar arc in terms of kind of how much experimentation and how much people are moving away from D&D as being kind of the be all end all of TTRPGs, right? And so I was always like, what's the point of D&D having 20 levels if nobody ever gets to level 20 and plays it?
So, funny enough, that was going to be my next question, because again, writing adventures are tough. Your like first like official adventure being a level 20 adventure. That sounds what were you like? That sounds like you're bringing off so much like pain and torture upon yourself.
Yeah, and honestly, I was expecting to get completely slammed in the reviews for it too, because I was going to be people like, I've been playing this for 30 years and you're doing this wrong. It's horribly unbalanced, and I was like, oh no, because we didn't have that much opportunity to play test it either, because it was originally part of. I rejoined the RPG Writer Workshop thinking like, oh, this time I'll get it. I still didn't get it. Like I got a lot closer, and I released it like a month afterward, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think kind of how I approached that adventure was kind of like, okay, well, how do the best kind of like video games do like their raids or their high end content, right? Yeah. And that a lot of it came down to, it wasn't just the numbers anymore. It was kind of forcing player choices, which also ties into the most interesting parts of D&D, right? Having to make a decision that will impact your character, impact how the story progresses. And, the obvious other thing is people are always like, level 20 folks are basically gods, right? So what can you do except kill gods? And I was like, okay, well, that's perfect then.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you've answered my question.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, so the approach for that was kind of, so to add complexity, but at the same time, you're also like, okay, there's only so much a DM can handle, right? And they're not a computer, and they're not a video game. And so that kind of, I think, ties into a lot of my philosophy in a lot of what I try to design and a lot of what we do with the reviews and everything too, which is to be kind of thorough and to make things in some ways like kind of almost an experience rather than just a supplement. Yeah. And so like my feeling there was it's okay to give more information and it's okay to give a lot of parts of combat that the DM may end up not using.
Yeah.
And I think the important part of it was that you had a story and an experience you wanted to convey and to make sure that the DM was on the same page as you, for you to explain it well enough that they knew what you were trying to accomplish. Once they do that, then you can give them way more information than they need, but they have a tool set that they can pull from and say, okay, if I want to create this experience, but at my table for my players and the way I like to DM, these are the pieces that I will use. And this is how I will assemble.
No, because I think because I think one of the problems that comes with like level 20 stuff is the fact that the players can do so much. And as I suppose as an adventure writer and as a DM, it feels like you have to be prepared for like you can't be, I guess it's hard to be as prescriptive as to like, oh, you go to point A to point B, because it's the case that at any point they could be like, oh, well, we have this weird concoction of like spells and items that let us go, right into the layer at the like to the final boss immediately. And yeah, it seems like to sort of like break it up into like, okay, well, this is kind of how these are kind of the story beats or kind of like the kind of experiences that you have, and giving the DM the freedom to be like, oh yeah, this sort of stuff can happen, this sort of stuff can happen. Maybe discourage this happening.
Yeah, and having gods involved also is a kind of good way to kind of set some guardrails on the player, right? Because they're powerful, but they're still not quite that powerful. But I also feel like part of it is that like you have to trust your table. Like people talk about should the DM and the player relationship be antagonistic or not, and I'm firmly on the side that it should not be.
No.
Like, you should be telling the story together, and so the players shouldn't be actively trying to break the story either, right? And so when you're doing level 20, I feel like to a certain extent there has to be that agreement there that in addition to all the consent and safety tools that you should be using, you should also understand that okay, the DM has a story, and we should be doing our best to play along to an extent, and not jump to a completely different plane of existence and just start our own side story.
But then I suppose you kind of like touching on like a mechanical sense, taking inspiration from like MMOs and raids is one of the most kind of interesting way to make encounters more dynamic, because they always have that sort of thing of like everyone has their set role, and the moment you try and turn encounters instead of just we hit them, they hit us, we hit them, and I have to go. I don't know. I have to. My mind went straight to kicking goblins again. I don't know why. Anytime I have to think of an idea off the top of my head, it somehow involves a goblin. Sometimes a goblin cannon. Okay, let's go with that. Say,
like the goblin hucker, then, right?
This encounter involves there's a big boss in the middle. You have to get a goblin. You have to put it in the cannon. Fire the it kind of immediately breaks up the flow, because now players kind of have to divert their their energies into doing different stuff. And
I think the other thing is just like having all the characters involved be more than just you have to kill this thing, right? Like you have their story and their motivation, right? I think talking about goblins, that reminds me of your big goblin book, right? And one of my favorite things about that was that you kind of put kind of a story wrapping around it, right? Like you had Runa and Ulfgar.
Runa and Ulfgar, which was like a pair of a dwarf couple who just
with an adopted goblin,
right?
And so it's like immediately you're like, I want to learn more about these NPCs, or as a DM you're like, I want to tell a story about these NPCs because they're people, they're interesting, they have these little quirks and these little things about them, and then I can kind of wrap everything else that I have around it and incorporate it, right? And then if you're helping them tell these stories and find these goblins or do more about them, right? And then if you want, you could even drop them. And then you're having to protect them while you're doing this. And then suddenly it becomes, there's different things you need to accomplish within one encounter.
So then I guess like one of my questions kind of stemming from that then is so how do you like, I guess, personify the gods? So working, I guess like working with the, the Forgotten Realms, like established lore and stuff like that. yeah, how did you kind of find that kind of, because there is always that thing of like taking it, and again, never really taking it as gospel and having the kind of creative license, and then there's always that blurry middle ground of like, what?
Yeah, I think there's definitely in this case it was a mix of things. Like, there was obviously kind of partly the genre and the role they were playing, and so there's a bit of silliness to it because it's just tired of she keeps getting murdered, like, why? And kind of like, in this case it's a direct kind of inspiration from Volume 1 specifically. So you got to, I kept being worried, people would be like, Paul doesn't even show up in this, right? Because it's like that wasn't what Kill Bill Volume 1 was about either. Bill doesn't show up in it. And so, but kind of, like trying to fit, like, find, like, Bashaba is the ultimate villain, right? The goddess of misfortune, and trying to fit her into that kind of Lucy Liu role while also being true to her lore. But a lot of it was kind of just looking at their past history and looking at their domain and just trying to come up with something that made sense. I think the one pushback that I did get was Kellenvor. I turned him into a depressed stoner. Because I was like looking at his whole story and I'm like, who wouldn't his life is terrible. And so, but like people were like, I don't like this character. God of Death. He should be this like cool, like neutral arbiter of like judgment. And he shouldn't be like, but I was like, well, there's supposed to be an arc. So I'm hoping to do a book 2. It didn't really sell enough to justify it, but at some point I might just be like, okay, this is too fun to not revisit. Yeah. And so his arc was supposed to eventually take him away from that. But yeah, so like just kind of, but yeah, a lot of the gods that I kind of tried to focus on the gods that were human or mortal at one point, ascended to godhood, because they kind of had a bit more to pull from as well. But Bashaba was actually one who did not, who right, Timora, goddess of luck, that was a human, but Bashaba was not.
Really?
Actually, I think
because I don't know a huge amount, but like I know that like Timora and Bashaba, they came from Tai Chi. She basically, this goddess, there was a goddess of luck and misfortune, and they were split in half because they had this is getting deep in the lore. So
yeah, that's right. Okay,
Tai was corrupted by Dendar, I think, or not Dendar. Had some corruption, was killed by Lathander and Selune. And as they split in half, the good and fortune became Timora and Bashaba. But then it is possible that Timora in this was human, and then ascended.
I might be. This may have been something that I took creative license in, and I'm now confusing myself. So I'm actually trying to look this up now. But
like this, okay, so this is like
you're probably right.
No, I don't even know anymore. Like, so the funny story about, because I did Tai Chi's Torment, which is essentially all about like someone trying to bring back which actually the whole story about I used to call it Tyke, but I believe Ginny Loveday corrected me. I was like, I think it's Tai Chi, and I'm like, oh geez, I'm sorry. That whole sort of origin story made me hate Lathander, which is a whole rant for he's just like a pretty boy douche. But yeah, geez, it's weird because I know all this lore that I don't know where to put it. I just
right, yeah. It's like, I think, yeah. I mean, you could write a whole series about murdering gods if you want.
Dude, don't tempt me. I think this is it's sort of a form of catharsis to try and get it all out.
I know, right? But yeah, so no, I think, yeah, looking at the wiki, it does. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think I don't know why I did that then, because I swear I did the research and I didn't think I had changed anything too much with canon. But canon's a mess.
Yeah, because here's the thing. So there's a whole blank spot around like what happened with like the what's it called, the when all the gods lost their magic.
Yeah, like they got kicked out and
they got kicked out, and
yeah,
they probably were human at some. Yeah, that's what. So again, this is kind of taps into kind of a question of like the established Forgotten Realms lore is like it's so rich because it's carried over like 5th editions. It has gone through like revamp and like recreations again and again. That I think again, sometimes it is just better to kind of take that creative license, and otherwise, yeah, you wouldn't have like the stoner god of death unless you didn't, and it's kind of cool to have those fresh perspectives because yeah, realistically, like I mean, even though like if you were a god and let's say your domain is like law and order. Maybe you like the law and order, but sometimes you have like an off day. You have a cheat day. You're just no. Nice. No, fair. Well then, so Forgotten Realms tangent aside, let's just pop a pin in the Forgotten Realms for a second. Over like across your projects that you've kind of done, do you have like a particular favorite part of each project?
So like I think so yeah, I like there's like specific parts of the projects that I enjoy. Like I like the initial brainstorming phase because that's always fun, right? Because you can kind of run wild at that. There's no restrictions yet. And then like kind of like we talked about, kind of building those specific set piece moments, right? And kind of pulling that together and seeing all your threads converge. And then I have a love-hate relationship with layout as well. Like I think it's the same with writing. Like the actual aspect of writing, I don't actually enjoy that much. And the copy pasting things in and making sure everything aligns and isn't fun either. But like again, like once it's done and you see it all come together, or you see everything on the page and it actually looks like a real supplement, like there's kind of a lot of thrill in that. I think that
it's kind of like the peaks and valleys of like, you look at the page once it's complete, go, oh, that's really nice, and then you go out to the next page and it moves stuff about, and you're like, okay, I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, I tried writing in layout for a while. I know there's some people who do that, and then the first time I had to make an edit, that then had to go back and redo. This is not a good idea.
It's always a case of like, oh my god, I could do both at the same time. It will be like double, like or half the time, and then it ends up like doubling.
Yes, exactly.
But no, interesting. So I think touching on something kind of earlier, because it's kind of interesting, kind of design these kind of like set pieces or like these kind of climb. I think you mentioned earlier that so with kind of like your enjoyment of like video editing, when you are imagining these kind of, are you coming at from like a very sort of cinematic angle, or like I'm curious about like what is a set piece in your mind, I suppose?
Yeah, that's actually a big problem for me because I kind of always everything, like even when just writing fiction, like I see it as a scene from like a movie.
Yeah,
kind of like this is how it would look if it was a blockbuster. And so then like trying to translate that over, it sometimes causes some trouble. And then sometimes, like I get lost in the weeds of like mechanically, like especially when you're writing stat blocks, like suddenly having like a 2-page stat block because you want to include all these cool things they can do. And then you want to write out like exactly how it works. And at some point you're like, no, like we have to like just get the essence of it across and then trust the DM to do it right. Kind of letting go of that is a little hard.
It is like these 2-page stat blocks are it's easy to do because you think about like in my mind I imagine this creature doing this and doing this, and it's like, well, they need different abilities for that. And then realistically in some of these cases, like the creature may not even be alive that long, like the party are just gonna exactly. Like absolutely smush this.
Yeah, I have way too many stat blocks that have like several abilities just geared toward the thing running away so it can stay alive a little longer. Not do that as much because it's too much. But I think kind of going back to kind of what I said about like, giving the DM maybe more information than they need and then let them do it. Like one thing that I really like doing is having maybe a slightly longer stat block or a few more abilities than maybe makes sense if you were to just throw it on the page in a monster manual. But then to kind of add like a tactics section where you explicitly say like, this is kind of the intention of the stat block. These are the abilities we would use in this situation. And sometimes it's like even social situations, right? Because you have things in there that are social things and not combat oriented. And then like if it's a really long stat block, like in Kill Ball, I think one of the big boss monster has a section where it's just like, if you don't want to deal with parsing any of this is what it does on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and then like rinse and repeat. And like, or like an MMO monster, right? Like it'll do this and this and this, and then it loops. And then when it hits this health point, it'll do this and this and this. And kind of just like write it out that way. And so they really don't want to deal with it. You can just run.
That's literally such a cool idea because like there is that thing of like when you even as a designer you can't help but have like an idealized vision of how these encounters go. And 9 times out of 10, they will probably fall at like the first hurdle anytime players are thrown in the mix. Because it's like, imagine like, the scene of like the Fellowship of the Ring gathering around, discussing about what the ring. If that was just like an argument, because that's what the players would do. It wouldn't be a very graceful discussion of like, no, the people of men will take it. It's like, no, I want the ring. I'm wearing it. It's already on my finger. I've stolen it.
Yeah, the road's gone.
But no, I must admit, I've never really thought about having literally like a sort of almost like a pre-scripted, like this is kind of what the boss will do and stuff like that. And it kind of, it literally, it makes it as easy as it can be to, for the DM, because when throwing a 2-page stat block, and especially at like level 20 adventures, I think it's good, the kind of stuff that you kind of need to because I remember once I did like a level 21 shot as a wizard, and it's one of my first times being like a level 20. I'm just looking at all these spells going, I don't know what to do. I literally, I can do anything, but it's too much.
Yeah, I've heard from people who are like, I want to DM a level 20 game. I can't find players who are willing to run level 20 characters.
It's like that. I would maybe like a barbarian. I just have to hit stuff. It's nice. But nice. So then I guess, so you kind of mentioned that as with the your favorite part just being these kind of like little bits and bobs where you kind of see the ideas form, you kind of go through the process and actually see it kind of begin to finalize and take shape. Is your least favorite part of the projects just those kind of nips of like the actual writing or the actual layout?
I mean, yeah, probably. I think the other thing is like when you have like an idea in mind, but you were wrong. Like I'll like be like, oh yeah, like this monster does this and this, or like the lore, right? Like, oh yeah, the lore, like this is perfect. And then you double check and you were like, it's like the Mandela effect or something. You're just like, you remembered this wrong. And now like do I just ignore that and go with this, or do I like change everything? I think that sometimes like the most creative ideas come from that, right? Like it comes from the adversity and the writer's block and trying to figure that out. So it can be really fun too. But I don't know, in that moment, like that's always something that I dread a little bit when I go and open the wiki or D&D Beyond.
No, because I think sometimes you are your most creative when there is like a restriction involved, and especially when you write again, maybe less so when you write yourself into that problem. Typically, it's just a problem that you have in an abstract sense. But yeah, and sometimes it is this kind of situation. Like, okay, well now I have the choice of like I guess to be honest, like I think I'm of the mindset that 9 times out of 10 you should probably like if something doesn't necessarily mesh with the established lore, just create your own. Just tweak it a little bit, or like reskinning and just say, oh, it's inspired, or because I think one thing that I've accepted as, at least particularly when it comes to like an adventure writing, that I think it's rare that people would run it necessarily completely out of the box. Exactly. They're going to sort of be pulling things out, and sort of throwing them kind of all about. So it's you just kind of have to roll with it and just like, use what you want, use what you don't want. This could be this guy, but it could also be this guy, or
exactly.
Yeah, nice. So then, okay, well, I guess leads to my next question then, which is if there's any sort of particular design choice that you've made across your projects that you're like particularly proud of.
I think like that kind of trying to make ways for stat blocks to work is one thing. But kind of like, I guess again, kind of, I think one of the things that I always try to do that I'm proud of when it works is to again try to provide enough content that hopefully every table has a bit of a different experience, and that it can tailor it to the sort of experience they like. And so like again, with going back to I guess Kill Ball, like there's a lot of combat, right? It's the whole thing mechanically is building towards this one big boss fight. And so hopefully the people who like combat have a lot to sink their teeth into. Yeah. But like but also to design it in such a way that people who like to explore, people who just want to tell a story also have an experience, and to have enough side quests and diversions such that like no one will have the exact same story that comes out about it. And so when people will be like, oh yeah, I played this and this was such an awesome moment, and someone will be like, wait, like we never even saw that. Like we did that. What are you talking about? Oh, but that's so cool because like it was something. So like it either has replayability or it has kind of more of a story, life outside of the game itself, right? And so that's kind of what I tried to do at the beginning with like where like you have like 7 possible encounters, but each table would only like play 3 of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure no one has run it as it's written. And then something else that I kind of tried to do, which is where I got confused about the lore for Tamora and Bashaba, is I had a how do you give out loot at the end? And I always want to try to create like that story, right? Like with Runa and Ulfgar, or with the Grey Merchant, where it's a literal merchant that's kind of trading goods.
Yeah.
And you trade it for things of different value and things like that, and you get different effects out of them. And so for them, I was like, okay, well they're raiding a casino, and it's like, and so they're escaping. So obviously the only way out is through a gift shop. So they go into the gift shop, and all the magic items and loot that they can pick up is in this gift shop. But the gift shop is also kind of, I guess, like a remnant of Bashaba's subconscious or something. And so it has like elements of things from her life and things in there. And so it's this very like story rewarding thing. But like, obviously if people aren't interested, they can just go grab that awesome, powerful artifact. But like my favorite item in that whole set is like a bunch of postcards. And the postcards are like scenes from her life, and like they're magic postcards. So like you can kind of imprint a memory in it, and whoever looks at it experiences that memory. And so it's so if somebody wants, they can grab that and take it, and they actually learn all of Bashaba's backstory and how she ended up being who she is. Because in the lead up to it, there's not really a lot of breathing room to tell her story and make her a sympathetic villain. But I didn't want her to just be this, murderous with no motivation, right? And so this was a way to kind of incorporate that as well, and find out that she actually has like this tragic backstory, and she may not even have been a villain at all, and she may have like the way I wrote the lore was kind of like she and Tamora, like they split domains, but she loved Tamora so much that she wanted her to have the good domain.
Yeah.
She took the bad domain to keep her from suffering.
So like a selfless act sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but then that kind of eventually dragged her down because she had to embody that domain as a god, and she was trapped in that role, and this whole story there. And so to kind of make people feel guilty for what they did.
I mean, there's like 4 creative things in a row there. Like the one of like on the get go of like, instead of just like, oh, you kill the boss and loot spurts out. Like the idea of like having like this whole sort of gift shop that kind of again ties in. And sometimes it is kind of nice to have that sort of, I guess, sympathetic. That's what I'm going for. Having that reveal almost too late is sometimes just as impactful as having all the sort of build up. And I do like the sort of idea of having kind of the starting adventure off with like seven or so different possibilities that can kind of fork their way in. They can have sort of like cameos and kind of things that people reoccur. Wow, geez, just an oodle of good ideas. In the gift shop though, the heroes they're stealing everything though, aren't they? Or are they buying things?
They're stealing it. She's dead. Like, can you really steal from a dead person? That's a bad question.
Well, I did. Listen, that's. I guess it's less of a logistics thing. It's more of a moral thing.
I mean, there's no one there for them to pay.
That's true.
I don't.
Maybe like the truly lawful good people can leave some coins on like the counter, and they can.
Yeah, they can. The whole like it's a pocket plane that's like dissolving though.
Yeah.
Like, as you're in there, you see like all these slob like eating the patrons outside. So it's like it's kind of chaos. You can do what you want with it.
It's because Bashaba, she really likes the sluds.
Yeah, so I wrote it as her domain is a pocket plane in limbo, and so
nice.
So all her like casino employees are slugs.
Which again, for like when it comes to like luck or misfortune, limbo, hey, it's the middle ground. It's nice.
It's very probability and.
So I guess I guess in like, so as I kind of mentioned before, you have kind of done like a little bit of everything with like come to like items, encounters, and adventures. Do you think you have like a particular preference like towards any particular type of product, or are you quite happy that you've kind of diversified in this way?
I like to kind of at least understand everything, and so this has kind of been also my learning experience. I think the one thing I haven't really messed with too much is classes and subclasses. So maybe soon, I don't know. That seems like a bit much, though. I'm just like, that's a lot to learn, and then that's a big commitment for someone else to buy and play, right? Because it's not just a one session thing. But yeah, I think I definitely like adventures. It was a little demoralizing to realize that adventures probably sell the worst on DMsGuild. But at some point you got to do what you like, right? Like, also found that trying to kind of chase what you think other people like. I mean, sometimes it's inevitable, right? Especially if you're trying to make a career out of this, which I'm lucky enough that I don't, this isn't my primary source of income. Yeah. For some people, I know it is. And then that's hard. But yeah, so like, I did Theros. I got Grey Merchant out on the same day as the Theros book because I kind of got into magic lore with Ravnica. And so it was something that I felt comfortable with, but like trying to chase like Van Reichtens, it's like,
yeah.
No way. Yeah. And so I'm just gonna write stories that I enjoy.
Yeah. No, I must admit with Wizards release schedule, I think it is getting harder and harder to try and like you have to be speedy, or you have to be like a team of creators to try and keep match pace. But every now and then, yeah, the kind of things just align where just like, oh, Theros is coming out. I wanna do something else. Speaking about Grey Merchant, any items that you like want to like shout out, because there's always got to be like one or two that's like, dude, being able to just open the book has got to feel nice.
So yeah, this is obviously not available print on demand on DMsGuild because it was my first thing. There was no way they were going to offer it. But I did release like a high resolution version that we tested through Barnes & Noble Press, and so anyone can take that high resolution version if they buy the product and send it off to get printed. Every once in a while, Barnes & Noble changes their specs, and then somebody's like, "It's broken." I have to go back. But it's also kind of nice to actually find out that people are doing it.
Yeah, I suppose it would be nice to just like if people send you photos with it, rather than complaints going, "Oh, it doesn't work anymore."
Yeah, and it has like it also has like, apparently you're not allowed to say you're distributing cards through DMsGuild because it's a licensing problem with Wizards.
Okay.
But you are handouts, and so a whole sheet of print and play handouts for all the Magic items. And so again, trying to make that kind of a comprehensive experience. I think my favorite item in here is like, there's some that we also created like a story item category where the item literally is just something that is a story hook.
Oh, nice.
And doesn't create magic items. But like, I think my favorite one is I think it's called Stubborn Boulder. Play on the Sisyphus myth, of course. Yeah. And so it's a boulder where like it starts like it's like a rock, but you can speak a command word and it turns into this black boulder. And wherever you put it, that's where it stays. And so other people you can push it away from that spot, but once you stop pushing it or you fail your Constitution check or athletics check or something, like it'll always start rolling back to where it started. And there's a lot of terrible things you can do with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I must admit, it's like such a unique twist on like, was it like an immovable rod that hurts now? I'm just like, that's odd. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I don't envy anyone who's like, it's my job to push this boulder, and then they take a rest and they go, oh, it's rolling away.
I just imagine that some group of adventurers is going to take it and block like the entrance to the tavern or something. But he can get out.
Yeah. I mean, you have, again, it's like a case of like, as a designer, you're like, oh, there's so many cool things you could do with it. It could be really like an emotive experience. But then you're like, no, they're just going to use it to like cause havoc and mayhem, and somehow it's going to kill the end, like the end boss in like one turn.
Probably.
Because my mind goes straight to, okay, so you set everything down, then you get it somehow in its own pocket dimension. Then you run it across like the other side of the earth, then you get it out. And is it speed based on how far, like, is it always like going to be like traveling at like 5 feet? Or does it like, if you have it 1,000 miles away, it goes like 1,000 times faster than if it was...
I was trying to keep people from using it to break the game. So I wrote that it uses the constant speed, but I think I did also write that it will be able to like break through most like if a structure has hit points, it'll probably eventually make it through the structure and things like that. So there's probably still a lot of terrible things you can do with it.
I mean, but that's the thing, though. It is a case of like having these items and then just letting the characters and players just be creative with what they can do with it. Like, yeah, if that becomes a whole arc of like, oh no, the runaway Sisyphus boulder, then that's an adventure in itself.
Yeah, again, I mean, that's the dream, right? To have someone come back with a story about.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So then, speaking of coming back with like a story, then is there anything over your story as a creative that maybe you wish you'd learned maybe sooner?
It's something that I think I'm still learning, which is like not to be too ambitious. Like, it's just, there's always, I mean, right, as creatives, especially with D&D, where you're like, your imagination's the limit, and you always want to try to do so much.
Yeah.
And just kind of learning what makes sense, and what your own physical limits are, right? Because there's only so much we can do in a day. Yeah. I'm actually signed up as a mentee on Ashley Warren's Patreon, where she has like a few slots where she'll kind of just check in with you on emails and do a little chat with you and doing and things like that. And I think she's been such a lifesaver, because she looks at things kind of more holistically. Like, it's not just here's how you write something, or here's how you. She's almost a life coach.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to use that word, because we just introduced like a villain who's a life coach in a streaming game. Right? But she's a good one. She's not an evil one. And so she'll be like, like, how do these projects make you feel? How are you mentally with these projects? Mm-hmm. What you're building a backlog. How do you do a creative audit of what you're doing and focus your energy on the things that are most meaningful and impactful to you? And that's something that I'm very much still trying to get a handle on. But like, we have several projects in motion that have been probably in motion a little too long. And it's things where, like, if I had known better at the time, I maybe wouldn't have started them. I would have scoped them differently. And things.
And that project scope is something that is it's hard to keep. Again, most projects, it feels like the scope is nebulous. And you always like, it'll be the length of the string. It'll be however long it'll be. But realistically, sometimes you do need to be like, no, the scope is not changing. Like, I can have 101 better ideas, but I'm sorry. For my own sake, I just need to not stop staring at this one document. But no, dude, that's awesome. So, I mean, is it possible that there may be an adventure writing workshop, like a third attempt to go to?
No, I feel like I wrote the adventure. Yeah. So I think that's it for me. We'll make space for other folks to participate in all those bundles and all those things like that, which is really good. We certainly, we try to give back on all of these and like sponsor some scholarships and just really encourage everyone to do it. I know that for those for whom an adventure in a month is too daunting, there's right now this month, it's already started, but I'm sure there will be another opportunity down the line is write an encounter in a month, right? Yeah. And they're actually going to, I think, consolidate all the encounters into one release this time, which is great from a publication perspective too. Just trying to get that thing out and like having 3 days to do it, like in the curriculum, is like
it's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so I think that makes it a lot more accessible too.
Yeah, gee, I mean, I must admit, everything that's coming out of the I guess I forget the overarching name of like the kind of adventure variety workshop, but then it's also just
storytelling
affair. That's a beautiful name. It's good. No, it's incredible, and yeah, they're honestly like the work to kind of bring more people in. It seems like at least the adventure writing workshop, it grows in size every term.
I think they may be completely revamping it this year, because it just got like unmanageable. I think the number of people signing up, but I don't know for sure. I'm not privy to those details, but it's just kind of things I've heard.
Neither am I, but this is just from the grapevine, we've heard things. So then, this is actually kind of like the perfect kind of segue to kind of talk about, I guess, the community as a whole. But would you say there's like particular people in the tabletop RPG community that like particularly inspires you?
Oh, for sure. I was when you teased that this question was possibly coming, and my first thought was like, do you have a theme song? Because it's going to be like the Academy. I want to thank my cat and my hairstylist and somebody play you off, because there's just so many people. Like there's so many people doing such good work in this community. I think I mean, like, yeah, Ashley definitely, right? Like without her we wouldn't be writing, like Theo or myself. And I think Ricardo over at Hit Point Press, you know, they make like Humblewood, Deck of Many, Heckna, all those, like just very inspiring in terms of, like, you know, we remember backing that very first Deck of Many Kickstarter and seeing that grow into its entire own publishing company of its own, right? And their brand, and they're publishing other creators stuff like Sina Una and Hexbound and things like that. Just seeing that success story is so inspiring, right? And seeing what you can do as a group of creators in this industry with just kind of grassroots support. Yeah. Of course, I'd be remiss to not admit that they've also been sponsoring us for a few years. but I'm so grateful for that too, because without that sponsorship, like, we probably wouldn't be able to do what we do now.
But I mean, in particular, hearing those kind of the stories of like a singular project kind of, again, turning into an entire publishing house, as you said, it's so impressive, and particularly with like the groups that are clearly kind of paying it forward, and, you know, bringing more people into the industry, and you know, paying like fair rates and everything. It's
absolutely,
it's one of the best things.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll keep listing names.
No, it's like again, this is the cruelest question I have, is because the case of like, either it's a case of like, I have so many people I want to say and I'm worried I'm going to forget someone, or it's like, you know, there's too many people to highlight any individual. So it's generally just me opportunity of like, it's a good old community. We've got some good eggs in there.
Yeah, definitely. I think. So yeah, like, you know, all of like, yeah, like I'm always like constantly like on Twitter being like, oh gosh, I want to work with this person. I want to work with this person too, because they're so awesome. And I just, you know, like, and I want to see what they do. I want to back their Kickstarters and all that. So definitely, you know, everybody out there. I think the one other person we want to shout out who's kind of not as much part of that community is our good friend Michelle Powers as well. So she right now within the community, she's one of the moderators for Satine Phoenix and Jameson Stone for like Gilding Light and Apotheosis Studios. She's the showrunner for a lot of the shows on Gilding Light and things like that. But we met her at D&D Live 2019, and at the time we were like, none of us were that involved in the community.
Yeah,
kind of like everybody else here is like, what do we do? And we're just standing in line, and we like just started chatting with each other, and like. She was a big fan of Satine Phoenix, and at the time, and so we were like, well, Satine's like, she's right there, and she's like taking pictures with folks and chatting, like, go talk to her, to her. And, you know, and she was like likewise encouraging us to go like talk to people, and like that's actually where a lot of our stuff got started. Like that's how she met Satine and eventually became like,
wow, to literally be there at that moment and stuff like that, and geez.
Yeah, she's just, and again, she's just a wonderful person. She's always supportive of us. She's a great ghost girl on Twitter, and like she'll probably be showing up in more streaming shows and other content. We've been encouraging her to do some writing and publish as well, but she's like, I don't have time for this. But yeah, so she's just amazing and inspiring as well. And we're kind of like, it's like kind of all that positive energy, and then try to pass that on to everyone else we work with as well.
No, I think, you know, there's the the adage of like, you know, leaving things better than you found them and stuff like, or high tides raid all ship. There's 110 different sayings of like, you know, all essentially the same sentiment. But it's good, and especially even better to actually like, you know, actively live by them rather than just saying them. No, awesome. So then I guess looking to the future and everything then, I guess what are some of the things you're currently working on? What's in the pipeline?
So the big thing right now, and hopefully if this video comes out in time, is so speaking of Satine Phoenix, we're actually working with her on the project she's kickstarting right now. Yeah. So definitely want to do a shout out for that. You can go to thebardbook.com. This is the URL that will redirect hopefully to the Kickstarter project.
There will be a link to the Kickstarter project anyway in the description anyway. So
great. So we're really excited about that. It's such a good group. You're talking about Kat, our rival ally, also working on the book. And so many other great folks. like Cage and Jessica Markram, who I've also had the pleasure to work with a few times now. And she's just wonderful, and I love everything she puts out and all her cat stuff.
Yeah.
There. So,
but speaking of cats, there's one off screen.
So yeah, we're really excited about that. We're kind of able to work on some of the key NPCs and locations in the city, and just the whole book is, you know, about bards, but not only for bards. So if you want to be like a barbarian who's a drummer and gets out anger that way, or sings heavy metal, like you can still do, any class is still welcome, but you can kind of flavor it that way. It's a very epic. It's another high level thing. They're working with the folks at C20 Games to balance.
Ooh.
Well, and so I'm like, I think there's like options to scale it down, but it's being written as like a capstone. Like I think it starts at like level 14 or something.
I mean, like, there's always a call for content like that, and I must admit, I can't like. I would want to play something like this, but I feel like I would need like a group of players who are like all musically talented. It's just imagine like the harmonies of just all the other sort of players.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's also like, you know, like, because I think they're running a Sirens game right now that's going through Salvata now, the city, and like they have one of the Sirens is like a ribbon dancer, and so
nice.
She's like, her subclass is like College of the Anatomy or something. It's all about like how you use your body and like dance and things like that to be artistic. And like, you know, I think there's like probably like a beat poet like subclass out, or like, you know, thing out there. So it's like bards come in all shapes and forms.
Of course.
We're running a limited run streaming show promoting the Kickstarter as well on Gilding Light right now, called A Song for the Shadows. It airs Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. And like what Theo did there was he tried to pull together people he knew from his life who were not streamers, not actors. Well, okay, no, one of them actually is a professional actor. That's not fair. but like not TTRPG players, and like, but like who do a lot of good work. And his team was like, you know, bards at their core. It's not about the performance; it's about inspiring people and uplifting people. And anyone can be a bard. If you go out and you volunteer, you make someone's day brighter, you help someone in need, or you just lift their spirits, like that makes you a bard too.
Yeah. Oh no, that's so much more wholesome than just a guy with a drum. No, yeah. Oh no, wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, yeah. So it sounds like again everything's kind of ramping up, and yeah.
And I actually, speaking of the longer running project, we have there's Fight Your Minis too, and we're hoping to maybe open that up as a more of a community project. I'm hesitant to say that in public right now because I'm so make sure we do right by everyone, because we're always trying to make sure like people get compensated appropriately for the time, things like that too. But so one of the other big DMs Guild projects that we're doing is I teased it briefly on one of the Design Dash episodes, but I've never actually talked about it. Ooh. So, but it's called Law and Beholder.
Ooh. Yeah, you had me at Law and Beholder.
Again, with the bad names. But yeah, so the premise of that is you have a lawful good beholder. But he's lawful good because, you know, the driving force of a lot of beholders is their fear of death, right? And they're wanting to make sure no one can get them. Yeah. But so a lot of them are evil, right? They want to kill all of their enemies and things like that. But it's like, what if there was a beholder who felt that, well, maybe if everyone followed the law, well, it would be breaking the law to kill me, right? Like, it makes sense, right?
No, you can't argue with that logic.
And so it's kind of like, and so I wanted to kind of draw from like this more cinematic ideas. And so the idea originally, which was, again, way broader scope than I should have ever made, was, let's make it like an episodic TV show. And so I reached out to like a few writers who had kind of written bigger things. And we actually had a few folks who had to drop out because I was asking them to write too much. But we ended up with still a really good group. And the idea was everyone would contribute an episode to a season. Yeah. So we would have kind of an optional season arc where you would have a big bad and it would be seeded throughout these episodes. Yeah. But each episode was supposed to be standalone, and it would be its own supplement essentially. So we. Sorry. I was
gonna say, it sounds like you're writing a campaign book.
I guess. But we were gonna try to do it so that it would be like each episode would be released separately, and then there would be like a 2 or 4 week gap between each one. Yeah. The next one would come out, and so it'd be kind of a story that hopefully that would encourage kind of people to maybe even want to keep up with it and make it a bit of an event and things like that. Yeah, and so now it's a lot to it's a lot to edit and supplements and all that. So we're working on it. It is going to come out eventually. But we're trying to kind of make it a cool kind of multimedia experience, have some like maybe comic books or brief podcast run stories set in that same universe, telling these stories in Waterdeep. It's going to be kind of like a noirish thing, but it also kind of leaned into parody very heavily. And so like there's a lot of fun little monster things going on, and each story that you can explore and then like dive into a certain part of Waterdeep, and then like build up also kind of a legal structure. So they're trying to reform Waterdeep's kind of really terrible code legal, if you look at it from a modern perspective.
Yeah, no, just a little.
And see how they can reform it and kind of butting heads with the existing like Lords of Waterdeep and the City Watch and things like that. So hopefully kind of an interesting.
No, again, yeah. When you said a lot heavy on parody content, I was like, oh, with a name like Law and Beholder, wow, I'm shocked. No, honestly, that sounds such a cool idea. And you had me at Waterdeep as well, because I try as I might, I can't avoid that the City of Thunder. I love it.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I guess, Grady, the next kind of important question is if people want to stay up to date and hear about all these releases and generally everything that you're up to, where are some of the best places that they can kind of stay up to date?
So I mean, the best places. Well, our handle is Gallant Goblin on Twitter, and it's the Gallant Goblin most everywhere else, like Facebook and Instagram and things like that. But so we do tweet, but I know the Twitter algorithm is a little sometimes. If you want to also see our awesome reviews, YouTube is probably the best place to follow us. So youtube.com/the Gallant Goblin. We've got lots of cool reviews there, but we also, we'll plug our things and also some of our cool sponsors things kind of at the beginning and end of each video. And so we'll do announcements like, oh, hey, the next Fire Minis is out, or hey, we're doing this cool thing. Check it out if you like, that sort of thing. Yeah. We also have the Patreon if you'll want to keep up to date with that, but that's obviously no pressure there. Release almost everything we have for free, and that's kind of an optional thing.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, by listening to this podcast, you're obligated to go at least check out the Gallant Goblin Patreon. Right? That's all you have. You have to click the link and then maybe stick around, maybe see what happens. But no, honestly, Grady, thank you so much for taking some time. Again, we've an hour has happened. We've done it.
Thank you so much for having me. I guess it's an honor to be here. I've always enjoyed seeing your episodes come up and all the amazing guests that you have, and so just being among them now is so cool.
I'm surprised people keep saying yes. I don't know. Who knows?
I mean, it's so much fun too. So
it is. Yeah, I think it's nice to kind of have this time to have a chat, and it's always been super insightful. But yeah, no, again, I can't thank you enough for joining. This has been an absolute blast. I guess I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. I think I don't know if I have any stuff coming out right now. Check the link in the description if there is anything there, because time is nebulous, and I don't know if any of the projects that I'm involved in are coming out anytime soon. Well, hopefully we can get Creaky Steve out. Yeah, we can get Creaky Steve. Yeah, there is in the link to the description, I will include our Design Dash episode where people can hear about Creaky Steve, the cook-off contest, as well as the inhospitable hags.
All she wanted was a cat to be treated well, though.
And well, speaking of cats, I guess my very final question then is, if you don't mind, then Grady, how do we end a podcast?
So I like to end a podcast with the cat interrupting everything and just causing technical difficulties. So
there'll just be like static that just appears on screen.
Right? It's just like, I'm gonna walk all over your keyboard now and knock your camera aside.
Oh, what's her name?
This is Tilly.
Oh, she's so cute.
We have 4 cats. She's my favorite. People say you're not supposed to have favorites, but they're lying. Everyone has their favorite. You love them all.